Ice blue, the precision processor. Ice blue eyes look almost unreal. They're pale, crystalline, sometimes bordering on silver, and they tend to stop people mid-sentence. That intensity isn't aesthetic, it's structural. Ice blue eyes have extremely low melanin combined with a very uniform iris fiber layout, which causes light to scatter cleanly and evenly instead of diffusing chaotically inside the eye. Because of that structure, ice blue eyes deliver sharp, high contrast visual input to the brain. Edges look crisp, details stand out, visual focus doesn't wander as easily. The brain receives fast, clean signals, which often shows up as intense concentration and a gaze that feels locked in. People with ice blue eyes aren't staring. Their visual system simply doesn't drift the way others do. But that precision comes at a cost. With almost no pigment acting as protection, ice blue eyes struggle in bright environments. Harsh lighting, screens, and direct sunlight create sensory load quickly. The brain works harder to regulate the flood of incoming light, which can feel mentally exhausting over time. Ice blue eyes are built for clarity and detail, not chaos and brightness, which is why they thrive in controlled lighting and feel overwhelmed in visually loud spaces. Very light blue, the overclocked sensor. Very light blue eyes didn't evolve to be comfortable. They evolved to notice everything, whether you ask them to or not. If ice blue eyes are precision tools, very light blue eyes are the settings menu with the brightness slider stuck on max. These eyes contain almost no melanin at all, which means incoming light doesn't just pass through, it bounces around freely inside the iris before reaching the retina. That creates extreme sensitivity to movement, contrast changes, and peripheral motion. Subtle shifts in the environment pop instantly, especially in dim or low light settings where these eyes perform unusually well. The problem is that the brain doesn't get to choose when to stop receiving that information. Visual input comes in hot and unfiltered, which makes the nervous system work overtime to regulate it. That's why people with very light blue eyes are often alert and observant but feel drained in visually busy environments. Big stores, fluorescent lighting, bright sun, and screen-heavy days hit harder, not emotionally, but neurologically. This is also why very light blue-eyed people tend to squint without realizing it and seek out dimmer spaces to recover. Their eyes aren't sensitive in the fragile sense, they're overclocked. The system evolved for fog, snow, and overcast skies, not modern lighting designed by people who hate human comfort. Steel blue, the built-in stabilizer. Steel blue eyes look like they've already processed the situation before everyone else finished reacting. They're cooler, deeper, and more muted, the kind of blue that never looks surprised. And that's not an attitude, that's filtering. Steel blue eyes contain more melanin than lighter blue types, along with denser iris fibers. That extra structure absorbs and dampens incoming light before it reaches the retina. Less glare makes it through, less internal scatter happens. The visual signal arrives cleaner and quieter. Because of that, the brain doesn't have to fight incoming chaos. Visual information is steadier, which supports sustained attention and emotional regulation. People with steel blue eyes tend to stay calm in bright or busy environments that overwhelm lighter-eyed types. Their system doesn't spike easily, it stabilizes. The trade-off is subtle. Steel blue eyes aren't as sensitive in low-light conditions, and they may take slightly longer to adapt when lighting changes suddenly. They don't detect every micro-movement the way pale blue eyes do, but what they lose in sensitivity, they gain in control. Steel blue eyes are tuned for endurance, not stimulation, a visual system built to stay steady while the world gets loud. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, subscribe. This channel explains why biology keeps exposing you. Sky blue, the balanced scanner. Sky blue eyes are the most common blue eye type, which usually makes people assume they're the most basic. In reality, they're common because they work. Think less dramatic mutation, more well-calibrated setting that didn't break anything important. These eyes contain enough melanin to reduce harsh glare, but not enough to block light aggressively. The result is a balanced intake of visual information. Light enters cleanly without overwhelming the retina, and contrast stays high without turning into visual noise. It's a middle ground system that handles most environments without complaint. Because the visual signal stays stable, the brain doesn't need to overcorrect. That often shows up as steady attention, good situational awareness, and emotional readability. Sky blue eyes make pupil changes easy to see, which subtly broadcasts internal state. That's why people with this eye type are often described as approachable or open. Their eyes unintentionally communicate more than they realize. The downside is that balance doesn't mean immunity. Harsh lighting and screen-heavy environments still drain sky blue eyes over time, just more slowly. They don't crash like very light blue eyes, and they don't shield like steel blue eyes. They adapt, compensate, and keep going, which is exactly why so many people recognize themselves in this one. Ocean blue, the deep focus absorber. Ocean blue eyes are darker than sky blue but still unmistakably blue. They don't glow, they don't sparkle, they absorb. If other blue eyes feel reactive, ocean blue feels quiet, like they're watching without announcing it. These eyes have more melanin than lighter blues, but not enough to shift into gray or hazel territory. That added pigment reduces internal light scatter while still allowing blue wavelength reflection. The result is a visual system that prioritizes depth over brightness. Because incoming light is dampened rather than amplified, the brain receives slower, heavier signals. This supports deep focus, longer attention spans, and reduced visual fatigue. Ocean blue eyes don't jump to every stimulus. They linger. People with this eye type often feel more comfortable in visually complex environments because their system doesn't spike as easily. The trade-off is emotional opacity. Pupil changes are less obvious, which makes these eyes harder to read. Ocean blue eyes often get labeled as mysterious or distant, not because they're hiding anything, but because their visual system doesn't broadcast internal state the way lighter blues do. These eyes aren't scanning the surface, they're processing depth. Blue-green, teal, the dual-channel processor. Blue-green eyes sit right on the fault line between two systems. Sometimes they look blue, sometimes green. Sometimes they confuse everyone involved, including the person who owns them. Structurally, these eyes have uneven melanin distribution paired with mixed collagen density. Light scattering isn't uniform, which means different wavelengths dominate depending on lighting conditions. In practical terms, the visual system is running two processing modes at once. This creates a brain that switches between sensitivity and filtering depending on context. In low light, these eyes behave more like blue, open, alert, and responsive. In bright light, they behave more like green, controlled, filtered, and selective. That flexibility allows strong adaptation, but also creates internal inconsistency. People with blue-green eyes often feel mentally on all the time, even when resting. Their perception shifts with environment, which supports creativity and situational awareness, but can make it hard to fully shut down. These eyes are excellent at reading nuance, and terrible at ignoring it. Frosted blue, the diffuse softener. Frosted blue eyes look cloudy, milky, or slightly washed out. They don't reflect sharply and often appear softer than other blue types. These are the eyes people describe as gentle, even when the person absolutely is not. This effect comes from micro-irregularities in the iris fibers that diffuse incoming light rather than scattering it cleanly. Light gets softened before it reaches the retina, reducing harsh contrast and sharp edges. The brain receives smoother, lower contrast visual input. This supports calm perception, reduced visual stress, and emotional regulation. Frosted blue eyes tend to feel less overwhelmed by brightness, but also less stimulated by detail. They don't chase visual sharpness, they smooth it out. The downside is reduced visual urgency. These eyes may be slower to react to sudden changes or subtle movement. Frosted blue eyes trade precision for comfort. They're not built to scan for threats, they're built to keep the nervous system calm. Gray-blue, the adaptive wildcard. Gray-blue eyes never seem to make up their mind, which is exactly the point. Some days they look blue, other days they look gray. Sometimes they look like they're reacting to your mood instead of the lighting. And no, that's not in your head. Gray-blue eyes have uneven melanin distribution combined with layered collagen fibers in the iris. That structure causes light to scatter differently depending on pupil size, emotional state, and environment. In other words, the color change isn't cosmetic. It's a dynamic visual system adjusting in real time. Because of that variability, the brain attached to gray-blue eyes tends to be highly adaptive. Visual intake shifts with context, allowing rapid adjustment between low light, bright light, and visually complex environments. These eyes don't lock into one processing mode, they flex. That often shows up as strong situational awareness and an ability to read environments and people quickly. The trade-off is inconsistency. Gray-blue eyes don't offer the same stability as steel blue or the same sensitivity as pale blue. They're always adjusting, which can feel mentally tiring in chaotic environments. But that flexibility is also their advantage. Gray-blue eyes aren't built for one condition. They're built to handle whatever shows up next. Blue eyes can feel mentally draining in modern life because they evolved for softer, low-glare environments, not constant screens, LEDs, and harsh artificial light. With less melanin to block incoming light, the visual system has to work harder just to keep perception stable, which creates sensory fatigue, not emotional burnout. Over time, that extra background processing shows up as eye strain, headaches, irritability, and the instinct to escape into dimmer, quieter spaces. It's not a personality flaw, it's a sensory system asking for different conditions. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe to The Explainer Scientist. So which blue do you have? Ice, light, steel, sky, ocean, teal, frosted, or gray blue? And which one do people misunderstand the most?